The M777 Howitzer is a big and bulky piece of artillery, tipping the scales at over 4 tons. It has no engine and no armor, and despite incorporating advanced targeting and fire control systems, it's still a very conventional piece of military hardware. So, on paper it should be relatively useless in the Russia-Ukraine war, a conflict that has become dominated by advanced unmanned aerial vehicles and state-of-the-art weapon systems. After all, with their kamikaze drones swarming across the skies, Russia should have little trouble seeking and destroying its enemy's artillery with ease. Yet, through a mixture of grit, innovation, and intelligent adaptation, Ukraine has made this seemingly worthless weapon an invaluable and deadly element of its arsenal. Before we look at how that's happened, here's a closer look at the weapon in question. The M777 Howitzer is a towed 105mm artillery system, designed and developed by the British defense company BAE Systems, though around 70% of its parts are actually made in the United States, with production and integration work taking place across both the UK and the US. The first M777s rolled off the production lines in the early 2000s, and they have since been introduced to service with ground forces in the US, Australia, Canada, Colombia, India, Saudi Arabia, and Ukraine, with the M777 first seeing combat during the war in Afghanistan. They've also been used in the Iraq War, the Syrian Civil War, the Yemeni Civil War, and now the Russo-Ukrainian War as well. Time and again they've proven immensely effective, and when you take a look at the technical specifications of the M777, it's not hard to see why. Firstly, despite being relatively big and bulky, they're significantly lighter than older models. To be more precise, at 4.2 tons, the M777 is 41% lighter than the 7.15-ton M198 Howitzer it was designed to replace. This is primarily due to the fact that it uses relatively lightweight titanium for large parts of its design, and since it's so much lighter than its predecessor, it's much easier to move around from A to B. It can be transported by helicopters and transport aircraft, like the Lockheed C-130 Hercules or C-5 Galaxy, for example, and can also be towed along the ground using air-braked vehicles like the FMTV and MTVR tactical vehicles. The more modern design of the M777 also means that it doesn't require as many people to operate it. Older models needed crews of up to 9 members, while the M777 can cope with just 5 or even crews as small as 3 people in emergency situations. Arguably, the biggest advantage of the M777 is its precision. Making use of advanced digital fire control systems, as well as GPS-guided munitions, it has the power to strike targets that are up to 25 miles, 40 kilometers away with extraordinary precision and only the slimmest margins of error. Its incredible accuracy has even seen some experts dub it a giant sniper rifle, able to pick off targets from range more efficiently than almost any other howitzer. Then, there's the M777's versatility. It's capable of firing a wide range of munitions, including M982 smart artillery shells that are able to land within 33 feet, 10 meters of their targets, even when fired from up to 15 miles, 24 kilometers away. It can also launch the likes of M549A1 rocket-assisted projectiles, Bofor's guided artillery cluster rounds, M128 base bleed projectiles, and extended-range XM113 rounds too. Only months into the war in April 2022, Ukraine received a large batch of 90 M777 systems from the United States, with additional units supplied by Canada and Australia. More arrived in the months and years that followed, and the US has also supplied several million shells, including both conventional munitions and specialized shells, like the M718 remote anti-armor mines, RAM, which is a type of artillery shell with anti-tank mines inside it. While there were some initial teething troubles as Ukrainian soldiers learned to make the most of the systems, they soon proved highly effective. Indeed, by early 2024, the M777 was being classed as perhaps the single most defining weapon in the conflict. At the time, artillery was the biggest damage dealer on the battlefield, accounting for around 80% of casualties on both sides, with February 2024 estimates suggesting that artillery systems had directly killed or wounded around 400,000 troops in total. And despite having numerous Western weapon systems at its disposal, including the French Caesar 155mm self-propelled howitzer, the American M142 high-mobility artillery rocket system, HIMARS, and the M109 Paladin self-propelled gun, the M777 was arguably the most highly prized among Ukrainian artillery teams, because it was so easy to work with, so precise, and so reliable, proving its worth time and time again. In February 2023, for example, the Kremlin's forces were making an aggressive push to capture a small town in the Donbass named Vuhledar. Huge numbers of Russian troops and Wagner Group mercenaries stormed the area, and one assault also involved a large mechanized column of tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and armored personnel carriers attempting to force their way through a choke point. The M777 picked them off like fish in a barrel. Over 30 heavy weapon systems were destroyed in only a short span of time, with Ukraine using the US-made M718 ram shells to wipe out tanks and APCs with ease. There were countless similar stories in other frontline locations, but as time went by, the war began to go in a very different direction, and many experts feared the worst for the M777. Russia began to rely far less on conventional ground warfare tactics and mechanized assaults, beginning instead to deploy unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, in far greater quantities than ever before. Ukraine, too, slowly but surely transitioned towards this style of warfare, developing and deploying its own arsenal of drones to counteract the enemy's attacks. And with literally thousands of drones soaring over the front lines at any given moment, big, heavy artillery systems suddenly seemed like massive targets, just waiting to be wiped off the map. Ukraine could no longer simply position its M777s wherever it wanted and blast away at enemy assault groups. Instead, it had to be constantly wary of the threat from above, constantly listening out for the distinctive buzzing sound of Russia's Shahed drones and other explosive UAVs. Because while the M777 is certainly capable of dishing out a significant amount of damage, it's not exactly built to take much of it in return. It doesn't have its own armor or other protective measures, for example, and a single drone hit in the right place is enough to put a whole howitzer out of action, either temporarily or, in the worst cases, permanently. It's no surprise that many military analysts believed that the M777 would inevitably become worthless as the conflict moved deeper and deeper into its drone warfare phase. But that didn't happen. Even now, in 2026, Ukrainian artillery teams are still using the 777 on a regular basis. They still rate it as one of the most important assets at their disposal, with one artillery crew, the 1st Separate Assault Regiment, openly admitting that if it weren't for M777s, Ukraine would be in a significantly weaker position today. The 1st Regiment adds that it recently received a fresh batch of these howitzers,